She stood on the makeshift stage like she didn't know her life had just been tagged at 98.05. Her little brother clung tightly to her hand, silent. No one expected the one who would raise his hand to save them to be a broke single dad with calloused hands and a heart stitched together with old grief. And this was only the beginning. Before we get started, while you're lying comfortably, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, but only if you really love what I'm sharing here. Comment below and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is. Let's begin. That night the sky was dry, but the wind slipped through a torn tin roof of an abandoned barn with a metallic whisper sharp enough to scratch the heart. Inside, a dull yellow light swung above a scattered group of people. No one spoke much, but their eyes, heavy knowing, carried the weight of something they didn't want to name. On a rough wooden platform, once used for tying up cattle, in winter, a gaunt, middle-aged woman, reeking of old liquor, dragged two kids into the spotlight. Harper 9 walked with her chin held up, fighting the tremble in her knees. Beside her, Theo 8 gripped the hem of her sweater. His lips were blue from the cold. He didn't cry. He just stared at the dirt. This is a pair the girl can wash dishes. The boy's quiet. Starting bid $200. Her voice was hoarse, soaked in booze and a kind of careless cruelty. No one moved. No one dared. And then from the very back of the room, someone shifted forward. A tall man in a worn canvas coat. Rough hands. Eyes of someone who hadn't slept enough in years. Ethan Cole, single dad, living deep in the woods with his blind son Miles. He had just fixed a broken-down truck for scraps. In his pocket, exactly $98.05, including coins that had weighed down his wallet for months. He didn't come here to be a hero, least of all to buy anyone. But when his eyes met Harper's, still and gray like ashes, yet not burned out, he knew. He couldn't walk away. $98.05, he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it was steady. That's all I've got. But I've got a roof, a bed, and a stove that mostly works. The room turned toward him like they had just heard a ghost. The woman raised her brows, then let out a dry laugh, like he was the best joke she'd heard in weeks. $98 for 2 mouths to feed. You kidding me? Ethan didn't flinch. I'm not buying mouths. I'm offering shelter. If you've got someone willing to pay more, then I'm sorry. Silence stretched and stretched until a woman's voice, soft as mist, but clear as a bell, rose from the back of the room. I'll cover the rest. Everyone turned. A woman in a long coat and wide-brimmed hat walked up, placed a thin envelope in the auctioneer's hand, and left without a word. No one knew who she was. She didn't leave a name, only a chance. Ethan turned to the children. I'm Ethan. My boy's name is Miles. He can't see, doesn't hear too well either, but he listens in his own way. If you're okay with it, you can come home with me. Harper said nothing, but she nodded, slowly. They left the barn as the wind picked up. Ethan's cabin was about an hour away. There wasn't much to it, an old stove peeling wood walls, a few blankets that smelled like sawdust. But there were no screams, no violence, no one asking, how much are you worth? Just a silence that was honest and new. Harper stared out the window the entire ride. Theo dozed off, leaning into her. Ethan adjusted the rearview mirror to see them better. He didn't know exactly what he had just done, didn't know what came next. But one thing he knew. He wasn't going to let them go back. Ethan's cabin wasn't anything special. A silver-tinned roof, weather-worn. 2 tiny rooms and an old kitchen that smelled like thyme and pine. In the middle stood a brick fireplace, and every time it lit, it made a soft clunk, like a tired old man clearing his throat. It didn't warm quickly, but when it did, it warmed deep. The door creaked open. Harper stepped in first. She stood at the threshold for a long time, not because it was cold, but because it was unfamiliar. Unfamiliar being invited in, not shoved. Unfamiliar seeing soft yellow light, not the harsh buzz of hospital fluorescence. Unfamiliar the silence, not the kind that threatened, but the kind that simply was. Theo peeked out from behind her eyes, scanning the room, forehead creased like he was bracing for someone to yell. But no voice came, only Ethan's low, gentle one from behind. That chair's got a wobbly leg. Sit careful, okay? And then from the next room came a boy. About 10, thin, messy brown hair, cloudy eyes unfocused. He sat cross-legged on the threadbare rug, one hand resting on an old Braille story machine. He didn't turn it on. He didn't need to. He just touched it, like he could read the day through his fingertips. This is Miles, Ethan said. My son. He can't see, Doesn't hear all that well either, but he knows when someone new is here. Miles didn't speak, but he tilted his head slightly toward Theo. A moment passed, then tap. Once, then twice. Theo looked up at Harper. She nodded. And for the first time that day, he smiled. One tap meant hello. 2 taps meant we're okay. Ethan hung 2 coats by the door. They were the cleanest ones left in the house last winter's snow gear. They smelled like pine oil motor grease and effort. Room next door's small, he said, but it's got bunk beds. The blankets are warm. I'll take the couch. Harper glanced at the threadbare sofa in the corner. She looked like she wanted to say something, but she didn't. Maybe for the first time, she realized she didn't have to bargain for peace. Dinner was canned, beans, noodles, and a handful of frozen peas. Ethan served it in 4 mismatched bowls. Harper looked at the crooked spoons, then whispered, "None of them match." Ethan chuckled softly. "Neither does this family." After dinner, Theo stood on tiptoes looking out the frosted window. "Are we really staying here?" Ethan paused at the sink hands, still in soapy water. He didn't turn around. "As long as you want. This is home. No conditions." Neither Harper nor Theo said anything. But later, as Ethan passed through the living room to fetch more blankets, he saw Harper quietly tucking Theo in, pulling the covers up with care. And in that quiet little moment, Ethan knew he'd done something right. That night, he didn't sleep. He sat on the old couch blanket, draped loosely over his lap, listening to the wind whistle through the cabin walls like forgotten memories. He thought about Miles asleep in the next room, about the 2 new souls who had drifted into his life like a winter wind cold, but full of meaning. He didn't know what he was doing, didn't know what tomorrow would look like. But for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. Outside, snow fell in steady silence. Inside, the fire tapped gently inside the hearth. The scent of burning wood slipped through cracks, touched the walls, and wove itself into dreams not yet named, of a family just beginning to become. The next morning, the sun hadn't fully risen yet, but a pale light tiptoed through the kitchen curtains. Outside, snow was still falling soft steady, covering the forest path like powdered sugar. The cabin was quiet, but not the kind of silence Ethan used to know. This one felt full. Miles was the first awake. He traced the wall's wooden trim with his fingers, found his way to the living room, and sat cross-legged on the rug. In his hands, the old Braille story machine, no longer working, but still alive under his touch. He didn't need sound, just the raised dots beneath his fingertips. Soon, after the door creaked open, Harper stepped out first, hair-tousled sweater hanging to her knees. Theo followed close behind, still gripping the hem of her sleeve, just like he had the night before. They didn't say a word. Harper looked at Miles at his hands gently exploring the quiet machine. Then she walked over and sat down across from him. Tap, tap, tap. 3 soft knocks on the rug. Harper tilted her head. 3 taps. That means, I don't know, right? Miles nodded barely, but surely. Theo stood nearby entranced. He walked over and sat next to them. Harper gently guided his little hand. 1 knock means yes. 2 means no. 3 means, you're unsure but still want to ask. For the first time, Theo laughed. Breakfast was oatmeal, made with sweetened condensed milk and a spoonful of brown sugar, Ethan's small stash, saved for a holiday no one ever came for. The 4 of them sat around the old kitchen table. 4 bowls, none alike, 4 spoons, all a little bent. Harper glanced at her mismatched bowl, then looked at Miles. He tapped the edge of the table once. "You like it?" she smiled. Miles tapped twice. Theo frowned. "He doesn't like it." Harper winked. "Maybe. It needs salt." At the sink, Ethan washed the dishes in silence, but his chest felt warm. His son was smiling. The kids were talking, not with voices, but with something deeper trust. That afternoon, the cabin settled into a quiet kind of peace. Harper brought out a notebook and started drawing no one asked her to. Theo folded a paper airplane from an old newspaper. Miles lay on the rug, drawing invisible circles with his fingers. No one knew what they meant, but he kept going like mapping emotions only he could read. Ethan sat by the window, adjusting the crooked curtain rod. He glanced around at the 3 of them, 3 souls once torn and tattered, now slowly stitching themselves back together. Then Harper asked, "Why doesn't Miles get scared, like we do?" Ethan put the screwdriver down. He used to be scared and angry, but then he learned how to knock 3 times and wait for someone to knock back. As evening fell, everyone began tidying up. No one asked, everyone just moved. Theo dusted the bookshelf. Harper folded worn blankets. Miles ran his hands over book spines, rearranging them in some secret order of his own. Ethan stepped outside to hang up coats and saw Harper standing on the porch. She wore no jacket, just a thin blanket wrapped around her shoulders, staring toward the trees. "What are you listening to?" he asked gently. Harper didn't turn around. "The wind," she said. "It's not screaming here." He stood beside her, said nothing, just followed her gaze into the woods. Then she asked, "If we mess up, will you send us away?" The question floated like breath in the cold. Ethan took a long, slow inhale. "I didn't hire you, so there's no firing. And I didn't buy you. This home will always welcome you." Harper said nothing, but after a moment, she placed her hand on the wooden porch railing. Tap, tap, tap. Ethan turned, and for the first time she smiled. A real smile. That night, when the house had quieted, he closed his notebook. The fire popped gently. Snow outside had thinned, and something inside him, small and glowing, had started to sprout. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was something simpler. Maybe it was trust. There's something Ethan had learned from living in the forests of northern Nevada. The wind never knocks. It slams. It howls through cracks. It slips into sleep like a whisper, reminding you you're never truly safe. That night, it wasn't just cold. It was the kind of cold that made your knuckles groan, made breath feel like glass. At 4 a.m., Ethan woke to the sound of the tin roof flapping violently like the wings of a giant bird trying to break free. He jumped up, grabbed his old coat, and climbed to the roof with nothing but a bag of nails and a creaky hammer. His hands went numb as he held the sheet metal against the wind. One slip, a nail drove straight into his thumb. Blood welled up slowly, but it didn't dull the icy ache clamping down on his neck and spine. When he came back inside, Harper was the first to see him. She was curled up on a chair blanket wrapped over her shoulders, hair still messy from sleep. "You're bleeding," she said softly, eyes narrowing with quiet worry. Ethan waved it off. "It's nothing, just a rusty nail. I've handled worse." But Harper was already on her feet. Within a minute, she'd grabbed a damp cloth, the old first aid kit from the bathroom, and walked over without hesitation. "Sit down," she said, her voice steady, no room for argument. Ethan looked at her surprised, then obeyed, partly out of respect, partly because something in her tone said she'd earned this moment. Harper worked fast, efficient, precise. She cleaned the wound with salt water, wiped the blood blue gently before wrapping the bandage. "Where'd you learn that?" Ethan asked, voice low and rough from the cold. She didn't look up. "The hospital. Every time. She hit us too hard. We had to get stitches. I just watched. Learned a bit." Ethan's breath caught. Something hurt deep inside, not in the thumb. "No kid should know a nurse that well," he murmured. She didn't respond, just tied the bandage. Tight, but not harsh. That whole day, the storm screamed around the cabin like it had a score to settle. The lights flickered, then cut out completely around noon. Temperature dropped hour by hour. The main fireplace was too weak to keep up. Ethan lit the stove and boiled a pot of soup with the last of the potatoes, beans, and carrots. Everyone gathered near the stove, not just for food, for warmth. Miles ran his fingers over the bowl. His face wasn't quite smiling, but it wasn't as still as before. Theo nudged him gently. "You like this smell?" Tap, tap, tap. Harper chuckled. He's saying, "I don't know what this is, but I think I like it." Ethan smiled, not at the joke, but at the sound of something real growing between them. After dinner, Harper pulled out a blanket and sat close to Miles. She brought an old medical book from the shelf and began reading aloud each word, clear, careful. "The heart has 4 chambers, 2 atria, 2 ventricles. A healthy heart beats about 100,000 times a day." Miles reached toward the page, fingertips brushing across the braille. Harper's hand guided his gently, patiently. She wasn't just teaching, she was offering a part of herself. That night, the cabin had no light except candlelight. The soup bubbled quietly. Laughter echoed in soft bursts, like little campfire sparks, from clumsy jokes and warm breath. And there was a fire, not just in the stove, but inside them. When Ethan finished cleaning up, he found something unexpected. Miles, Theo, and Harper were all curled up on the rug asleep, tangled like 3 small stones around a campfire. They had found warmth and chosen to share it. He didn't wake them. He pulled over an extra blanket, then sat beside them. And for the first time, he let his heart lean into the rhythm of someone else's breathing, and felt safe. No one said it out loud, but the cabin felt warmer the next morning, not just because the fire had been going since dawn, but because something invisible had begun to settle gently under the doors, and between the walls, the feeling of a place worth staying. Ethan woke up with his coat still on neck sore from the armrest. But his heart felt different, like it had slept beside 3 small flames all night and was still glowing from the warmth. Miles was the first to spark the change. He started inviting Harper and Theo to read with him. Of course, Miles didn't read with his eyes. He used his hands, his memory, his way of feeling the story. And Harper began bringing out an old anatomy book. Worn, crinkled, some pages held together with tape. But each diagram of heart's lungs, joint spines, lit something up inside her eyes, like someone had just turned on a lamp in her chest. "You like this stuff?" Ethan asked, noticing her sketching a human skeleton with a blunt pencil on lined paper. Harper didn't look up, just whispered, "I want to know how things work and how to fix them when they break." That sentence, so simple, rang through Ethan like a bell deep in the forest. He sat beside her quiet for a beat. "Sounds like you'll be a doctor." She paused for half a second. "That's what I used to dream about." Theo, the quiet 8-year-old, started writing. He wrote to save the little things in my head before they float away, as he explained. One day, Ethan caught him slipping a folded note into an old boot outside the door. "What are you doing?" Ethan asked. "Mailing a letter." "To who?" Ethan gently opened the paper. The handwriting was crooked, the spelling wobbly, but the words were loud and clear. "If you're cold, just walk to the end of the forest. There's a place with a fireplace toast and warm hearts." Ethan folded it back and tucked it into the boot. Who knows who might find it? That same week, Harper began teaching Miles new words. They used hand tap codes, not because Miles needed it, but because Harper needed someone to give to. And Miles, in his own quiet way, was the best listener there ever was. 1 tap heart, 2 taps pain, 3 taps still beating. Ethan sometimes stood by the door listening. He never interrupted. He just knew some things you can't learn in school, but you can learn them from a heart that's still learning how to stay open. One late afternoon, Harper stood by the window book about bones in her hand. "Uncle Ethan, yeah, if someday I go away for school and don't come back, would you be sad?" Ethan set his tea down and turned to look at her. No longer the quiet, guarded girl who once stood trembling in a barn. "Yeah, I'd be sad, very sad. But if it's what's best for you, then it's the kind of sadness that's worth it." Harper nodded slowly. "Then I'll try, but I won't go too far from here." As for Theo, one day, in the middle of the kitchen, he looked up and said, "I want to speak in front of people, like a crowd, about anything, without being scared." "Why?" Ethan asked. Theo shrugged. "Because once I shouted in the bathroom, and it felt really good. I want to talk to more people." Ethan didn't answer right away. He just rested his hand on Theo's small shoulder. "Then do it. Say what's in your heart. As long as it doesn't hurt anyone, it's always the right thing to do." Theo nodded, fast. He had found his voice, and now he wasn't planning on hiding it anymore. That night, the 3 of them wrote a letter together. It wasn't addressed to anyone. They didn't mail it. They just stuck it to the wooden kitchen cupboard. Scrawled in crooked handwriting, "This isn't where we were born, but it's better and more beautiful than any place we've been." Ethan read it before going to bed. He didn't add a single word. He just placed his hand gently on the paper and tapped 3 times. Tap, tap, tap. "I don't know what I did to deserve this, but I'm not going anywhere." There was something Ethan never told the kids. He often woke up in the middle of the night, not from nightmares, but from questions. Who paid the rest of the money that night? Who was she? In the quiet hours when the only sounds were fire crackles and the slow, steady breathing of 3 children curled up nearby, he'd lie there wondering, was there really a hand that lifted their lives without asking for anything in return? One slow winter morning, while searching for a Braille book for Miles in the old storage crates, a slip of paper fluttered out of a tattered cover. The ink had faded, but the print still held. Second Light Foundation, disbursement record, signed M. Lane. His heart stuttered. Margot, the woman in the long coat, the one who quietly stepped up in that cold, forgotten barn, who didn't leave a name, just a door left open. He didn't tell the kids. He simply got in his truck and drove 2 hours into the city, following the faint printed address along the edge of the receipt. He found a small office on the 3rd floor of an old building. No sign, just a brass doorbell with a quiet gleam. He pressed it. A moment later, a woman's voice came through the intercom. "Second Light, who's calling?" "Ethan Cole," he said. I'm sorry for not calling ahead, but I think someone here once helped save my family." There was a long pause. Then the door clicked open. Margot Lane wasn't exactly how he remembered her under the flickering lights of that livestock auction. Now she wore a dark sweater, her hair tied back. She sat behind a plain wooden desk by a sun-drenched window. A cup of tea sat cooling beside a stack of papers. She didn't stand, just looked at him and nodded. "I thought you might come one day." Ethan stepped inside and sat across from her. He didn't know where to begin. "Why me?" he asked simply. "You didn't know me. Or those kids. Why help us?" Margot placed her hands on the desk, her gaze steady. "Because I was once Harper. I was once Theo. I once sat on a cold floor hoping someone would come for me." She paused. Her voice softened. "I waited a long time. No one raised their hand. But when I saw you raise yours, even when you had nothing, even when it wasn't your job, I saw something rare kindness, when everyone else turned away." Ethan's hands clenched on his knees. Something rose in his throat, not emotion exactly, but something older, harder to name. Recognition. People saw the outcome, a man with 3 kids that weren't his. No one ever asked if he was scared, if he regretted it, if he felt like he was barely holding on. But Margot had seen something else. "I didn't want to be a hero," Ethan said slowly. "I just couldn't take the way Harper looked at me that night, like hope was hanging by a thread." Margot smiled gently. "That's exactly why I helped you. We're not heroes, Ethan. We're just the ones who keep the light on long enough for someone like you to find the door." Before Ethan stood to leave, Margot handed him a thin envelope. "It's not money," she said. "It's official recognition that you've been their temporary guardian so you can start the legal adoption process." He took it without opening it, looked at her. "Would you ever come visit?" "Just for a little while. I think the kids would like to meet you." Margot's smile returned. "Maybe. I've been waiting to be invited." On the drive back, snow began falling again, but it didn't feel cold anymore. Ethan didn't turn on the radio. He left the window cracked, letting the breeze in, along with something even lighter than faith. Maybe it was gratitude, maybe peace. That day arrived so quietly you'd almost miss it. A morning with thin snow on the ground. Ethan woke earlier than usual, made coffee, and felt something in the air, something like a holiday, but quieter. Harper was first to wake, hair tousled. She began setting the table without a word. Theo dragged a chair to the window and wiped the glass with his sweater sleeve. And Miles sat by the stove, small hands gently cupping a warm mug, as if he could hear the steam. Ethan stood in the doorway watching them, and smiled. 10 a.m. A small courthouse vehicle pulled up through the snow-laced path. A middle-aged woman stepped out holding a file wrapped in a plastic sleeve. "You're Ethan Cole." "Yes, ma'am. We have the court's final decision on the legal adoption." Ethan swallowed, not out of fear, but because he never thought he'd become anyone's legal father. Harper came quietly to the porch, standing behind him. "What does it mean, Uncle Ethan?" He didn't answer right away. He opened the envelope. Inside, beneath the cold, official stamp of the court, 3 names stood together like they'd always belonged. Harper Lane Cole, Theodore Lane Cole, Miles Ethan Cole. Ethan nodded slowly. "It means, from now on, no one can take you away from this house, not even the law." Harper looked at the paper, then at Ethan, and for the first time, she reached forward and hugged him. A full, warm hug. Back inside, Theo was scribbling something on a piece of paper. He tried to hide it when Harper walked in. But after lunch, Ethan found it taped to the fridge, scrawled in big, determined handwriting. "From now on, nobody leaves this house without Dad's permission." And underneath, someone had added in smaller letters. "Except for ice cream runs." Ethan chuckled. Soft, real. That afternoon, Margot Lane visited. She brought apple pie for the kids. Didn't stay long. But before she left, she knelt beside Miles, who hadn't spoken a word the entire time, hands resting on his old Braille book. She gently touched his arm and said, "Thank you for reminding me that there are things we can feel even without seeing." Miles didn't react, or so it seemed. But that night, after everyone had gone to bed and the fire burned low, Ethan lay listening to the wind whispering across the porch. And then from the bottom bunk in the dark came a voice, soft but clear. "Mama." Ethan sat up. Miles, still lying down, lips barely moving but unmistakable. "Mama." The first word in almost a decade. And just like that, a whole new journey was quietly, miraculously beginning. If you've made it all the way here, thank you. Not for listening to a good story, but for keeping your heart open long enough to receive a kind one. If something in this story made you remember someone you once loved, once lost, or maybe forgot, leave a comment. I read every single one. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and come back to the Social Justice channel. Out there, small stories are still waiting to be told, soft knocks that might just awaken the most human part of us all.